So welcome and thanks for being a part of this. I know we have more registered, so we'll see who else may pop on as we go. For your information, we are recording this meeting. We've been recording all of these meetings, and then we're posting them on a link that you can get to from the Midland Foundation website. So we've got several recordings there already, and this will go there as well. So we encourage you, if this is information that would be helpful to others, to go ahead and share that link with them after the program today. We will be taking questions via chat, or also there'll be a point in time at which you can raise them as well yourself if you'd like, but I'll be monitoring the chat for questions throughout this. So we're very excited today to have this topic as we look at mental wellness during these challenging times that we've faced. And we're very excited to have 3 different speakers with us today. We've got Dina Mason from Community Mental Health for Central Michigan. We also have Martina Rickards with Partners in Change and Megan Thompson with Meridian Public Schools. So we're very excited for the information that they'll share with us today. I think information very timely and important as we deal with some of the challenges that people are facing around mental well-being because of the impact of the flooding and honestly quite, before that, COVID-19 as well. So one trauma on top of another. So again, thank you to our speakers today, and I'll turn it over to Dina.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to be with us today. Megan is sharing her screen here, our PowerPoint. We are going to share with you a number of things today. Martina's going to share the impact trauma can have on our minds and our bodies and some common responses to trauma. Megan will share actions you can implement right away to promote positive well-being. Then Martina is going to share some strategies to help calm the mind and the body, and she's actually going to walk us through a couple of specific examples. Then I'll share with you all where to go for help when navigating the stressors in life become too much to manage on your own. We are going to save a little bit of time for the end for questions and answers. You're more than welcome to shoot any questions in the chat box as we present those, especially if something just isn't real clear or you have any questions on anything that we're saying as we're going along. Sharon will be monitoring that and will interrupt us if need be, if there's some clarification needed. So we're going to begin. In case you all haven't noticed, as a community, we've been maneuvering through some pretty unprecedented and quite uncertain times. As if having a 500-year flood wipe through and in some cases wipe out our communities at the same time as dealing with the impact of a global pandemic is not enough. We've also added political and civil unrest to our plates, along with a list of daily stressors in our personal lives. Some of us are managing job losses or the daily stresses of job stress, difficulties with our finances, difficulties in relationships. Some people are battling health scares. There's a number of daily stressors that we're going through on top of everything that's happening in our world and in our community. So we are surrounded with stressful events, and the impact of that can really take its toll on us. Martina is going to share with us the impact of stress and trauma.
Thank you, Dina. So as Dina was just introducing, we've been going through some really challenging and unprecedented times as a community and as a nation, as a world. And for today's presentation, we're going to be working from a definition of trauma, that trauma results from an event or a series of events or a set of circumstances that is experienced as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening and can have long-lasting effects on functioning. So, as this slide points out, trauma can really compound and build. There's often thought of as 3 different types of trauma: acute, chronic, and complex. And acute happens when somebody experiences a specific one-time event that they can point to on their life, you know, the timeline of their life. This happened, it was one time. Chronic happens when we have repeated traumatic events that are kind of building up on each other. Many, you know, some of us might be feeling that way right now, given the disaster in Sanford and Midland, Edenville, surrounding areas, and then also, you know, living through this time with COVID-19 and being separated from family members. And then complex trauma is often thought of as when we're exposed to varied and multiple traumatic events over time. So as we state here, the trauma can have neurological and physiological impacts on our functioning. And stressful events, traumatic events, can really impede our ability to access the thinking or the rational part of our brain. Traumatized brains often look different in three main ways than untraumatized brains. Typically, the thinking center of your brain is underactivated. So again, really difficult to make, you know, well thought out rational decisions. Our emotional center of our brain is often or our emotional regulation center of our brain is often underactivated as well. So it's difficult for us to process and name emotions. And our fear center of our brain is often overactivated. And that really touches into fight, flight, freeze responses. So what does this all mean? You know, it really boils down to that we really might have a hard time reacting, responding, and processing to daily events, not only, but also some of the really tough things that we've lived through recently. The other thing to think about is that we can't just erase traumatic events as much as we would like to sometimes. Our body creates memories both in our brain but also through our body, and that's been shown through research. An example of this, just a personal example that, you know, many on this call might have lived through as well, is when we had the emergency alert system letting us know that there was a dam failure happening, and that loud piercing noise that went through all of our phones. And I'm not sure if you remember, but a couple of weeks later, there was an Amber Alert, and it was the same noise, right? And so myself, and I know many others impacted by the disaster, immediately went back to the evacuation moment, right? It was a memory that was stored in our body, and it was accessed through something, you know, in our environment happening, the noise of the alert system. And so in those instances, we might notice increased heart rate, sweating, difficulty concentrating, and that's really that re-triggering of the traumatic event. So the other part of this too, you know, something to take note of is that trauma doesn't always have to be traumatizing. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of research suggests that the way that we respond to trauma, both immediately after the event and then, you know, the time following that, months and years following that, really can affect, you know, how we process some of these events. And I think particularly for children, and Megan will get into this, but it's important for children to have, you know, almost buffers or people in their family that are there to kind of support them through this. So again, it really comes back to how we respond and process through the events, the type of coping skills that we lean into, the type of resources that we're able to access, whether or not an event will be considered traumatizing. So this slide here, it maps out some common maybe responses or reactions that children might be exhibiting right now should they have felt that they're living through a trauma. And the important thing is that these responses are quite normal for the abnormal events that we're experiencing, right? And so it's important as, you know, caregivers, teachers, parents in these children's lives that we begin to look at their behaviors as a way of which they're trying to communicate with us, right? What is the function of this behavior? What are they trying to, what's the message that they're trying to let us know about? One approach, if your child or the children in your life are exhibiting some of these behaviors, one approach to take is to kind of see these sometimes difficult behaviors through a lens of curiosity, just how I mentioned a second ago. What skill are they looking for? What coping skill might be missing? What are they trying to tell me right now? The other impact of trauma that's seen both in adults and children is often as a result of trauma, the verbal part of our brain, where we access verbal communication, literally goes offline. So there might be some of us on this call that, following the disaster or with the COVID-19, we feel like we can't really share how we're feeling, or we lack the words, we're speechless. There's real science behind that. So, children experience that as well. The other thing too is that a child's response might look a lot different than a teen, young adult, or adult when we're going through this. So again, really looking for the behaviors. What if my child was typically a really wonderful sleeper or had a healthy appetite, has any of that changed? We can go to the next slide. So these are a couple more examples of things that possibly you or your children could be facing right now, given everything that we're living through. The other thing to mention is with children, and this information I pulled from the National Center for Disaster Preparedness. So they have a wonderful write-up of common responses in children that have lived through a natural disaster like what we recently faced. And in preschool age children, they talk a lot about, you might see regressive behaviors. So if your child, no longer was maybe wetting the bed or wasn't sucking their thumb, but now they are, that's normal. That might be a sign of living and trying to deal with trauma. In elementary school children, it's often that parents will report their child has become quite clingy or needy. Probably what that child is looking for is a sense of safety, security, knowing that they can rely on that parent or caregiver that they're around. So again, looking at notices and changes in behavior. Signs of stress can show up in many different ways, as these slides allude to, both physically and mentally. And something to kind of keep in mind is that often we might have a somatic response to stress or trauma. And what I mean by that is we might feel it physically. So we might be experiencing, maybe some headaches or tension in our body or unexplained stomach aches. And I'm not a doctor, but I'm just something to consider, that the impact of stress or trauma can really go much further than simply, your mental health response. We can go to the next slide. And I'll turn it over to Megan to talk a little bit more in depth about different ways to promote positive well-being if we are experiencing any of these responses.
Thanks, Martina. I'll be covering 11 tips for promoting positive well-being in adults and children. We can probably already list them all in the chat box if we thought about them together collectively. However, in times of stress and trauma, we often find ourselves forgetting to do these well-known, well-researched strategies to assist our own mental well-being. At the risk of covering items too basic on such a large and important topic, our presentation team felt it was important to list these next 11 tips and review some of the research behind them. This is not a one-size-fits-all presentation. We all have to find strategies that work for ourselves. The first strategy that I'm going to share or tip is positive relationships. It's most likely the most important, according to APA. It can help to talk to someone we trust following a crisis or in a time of stress, whether that be a significant other, a close neighbor, a friend, someone from a congregation, mental health provider, a teacher. It's easy to feel alone and have your worries build. Connecting to close family members and friends, neighbors, can be a source of strength and support. By sharing our stories and challenges, we may learn how others are managing similar situations, which may help us plan and cope. Many of us feel much better if we have a plan. We feel more in control. Building a connected relationship is the #1 way to regulate our nervous system. When we're around people that care and we care about them, our bodies produce oxytocin, which is a hormone responsible for calming our nervous system after stress. We can all probably think of someone who's been there during a difficult time, someone we know we can count on. If you can't think of someone right now, I'd encourage you to reach out for some help, reach out to others. You don't have to shoulder this alone. Sometimes after disasters, local support groups are formed. People feel a sense of relief and comfort by connecting with other survivors who've had similar reactions or experiences. Ed West, a retired social worker, is offering a support group for flood survivors currently. We have his contact, and as well, it was run in the Midland Daily News this week. If you look up the article, his contact information is in there. With specific regard to children, they say during uncertain times, it's more important than ever to lean into our relationships with kids. Let them know we genuinely care. As Martina said, they look for us to be their buffer, to let them know they're safe. And they look to us to see how we respond to the trauma or the disaster. Children look to the significant adults in their lives for guidance on how to manage their own reactions. Parents, teachers, caregivers, grandparents can help children and youth cope. If we remain calm and reassure our children that they are safe, it will help them in the long term to be more of a trauma versus traumatizing. According to Dr. Stephanie Grant, who is a developmental psychologist, the biggest predictor about whether an event is a trauma or becomes traumatizing is the caregiver's response to that event. So lean into your children now. If you're the parent, grandparent, teacher, neighbor, mentor, youth director, let them know you are there. Let them know they are safe, and model how you are positively handling this adversity in life. We as adults act as the buffer. That doesn't mean that we pretend everything is okay and everything is perfect, because it's not, we know that. But it does mean that we share information in a developmentally appropriate manner and reassure them that they are safe. We're honest with kids and share information that they can handle. We tell them that we're going to keep them safe. Please take note to monitor adult conversations. We have to take care of ourselves, and some of these conversations must take place between adults only. Also, monitor news and social media. Having a stream of local news going on that may be covering a natural disaster may be very anxiety provoking for a child. I've done a lot of research on resiliency, and what I'm finding is the bottom line in resiliency, researchers are saying, rests fundamentally on relationships. So our first tip is forming positive relationships. Our next tip is about going back to a routine as soon as you can. Try to set a routine. Doing normal, everyday things helps individuals feel in control. It helps us know what to expect, such as setting a wake-up time, a meal time, exercise time, and bedtime if possible. It doesn't always have to be the exact same or the exact routine as before or the normal routine, but setting a routine can be helpful. It helps families, children, and adults feel safe, feel in control, know what to expect. For adults, we like a purpose. We like a reason to get up in the morning. We like days without structure, but we also like days where we know what to expect. And we thrive on routine. We have to also acknowledge some of the deviations to our routines right now. We do have deviations due to COVID-19. Some are inconvenient and some are distressing when we can't visit a grandparent or someone with a health situation. Acknowledging those deviations can be helpful for kids. It's amazing to see the children back in school right now and how they're dealing with the routine that we have in place and the deviations and protocols than we had before. They are showing such resilience. It's wonderful to see. Kids gain security from a predictable routine. They can understand the deviations and the new routines. They also can understand that some of those deviations are there to keep them safe. Again, knowing what to expect can help them, such as a bedtime routine, where it might be brush, book, bed. I know my kids, when it came to bedtime routine, would never let us tuck them in without reading that book at night. They reminded us of our own routine. Helping your children feel safe and have a sense of structure can make them feel more relaxed and decrease their heightened state of arousal when they're uncertain of things. The next tip is having a healthy lifestyle. Take care of yourself. Engage in healthy eating behaviors and sleep behaviors. It enhances your ability to cope and deal with stress. Try to eat well-balanced meals and get plenty of rest. Many have seen the memes about the COVID-19 being the new freshman 15. Sometimes individuals may eat too little, and other times maybe eat too much. They're both stress responses. Many people who were impacted by the flood were working around the clock, not necessarily remembering to fuel their bodies or take a break. We are so very grateful for all the businesses, restaurants, churches, agencies, and people who provided food for the flood survivors and continue to do so. Currently, there are meals every Monday and Thursday in Sanford for flood survivors. We are grateful for those efforts to make sure that our community remains well fed. Some things to avoid: alcohol, caffeine, energy drinks, fast foods, sugar, and pop. Foods that can help reduce stress: water, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, fish, soups, and yogurts. Water makes up 60% of our body weight. We need it for every single function in our body. Every cell, tissue, and organ depends on water. Lack of water can lead to dehydration and drain our energy and make us feel tired. There's no set amount of water that we need to drink, although there's research out there that says 13 cups for a male, 9 cups for a woman, and about, or general rule of thumb, 6 to 8 cups. But what's best recommended is to check with your medical professional. Depends on your age, your size, and your exercise. Sleep, an appropriate sleep schedule, is so very important to our mental health. This was hard for our teens, especially during COVID-19 school shutdown. They were used to getting up at a certain time for school and then going to bed at a certain time. Many of them ended up staying up very, very late and sleeping during the day. We know that we respond better to a structured sleep schedule. And if you look at the hours of sleep recommended on the screen, it's quite a few hours. We know that it helps our mental health if we are able to get that kind of sleep. Sleep disturbances are what we often hear about with stress-related responses. Martina's going to cover a body scan in a bit, which can be helpful for many. Progressive muscle relaxation is another strategy that might be helpful. They're listed on the bottom left of your screen, and we'll put some links in the chat box later that may be helpful for people to find these strategies. Sleep meditations are also available on some of the apps that we'll share in a bit. Again, they're all guided situations, but progressive muscle relaxation is slightly different than most, in which you're actually intentionally tensing your muscles as you breathe in and relaxing them as you breathe out. Again, through a guided method. Music, soothing music, can also help with going to sleep. They find that if you have about 60 to 80 beats per minute on your music, it can match that of a resting heart rate and encourage a deep relaxation. So again, it's very important to try to eat right, sleep well, and make sure you're getting plenty of water. Physical activity is essential for our mental health. It helps all ages. Exercise reduces levels of the body's stress hormone. It produces endorphins, and chemicals in the brain that actually help as natural painkillers and mood elevators. The emotional effects are also there. You may get in shape, increase your strength, increase your stamina, and therefore increase your self-image. You may also master a skill or stick to a schedule that you're proud of, which may increase your self-confidence. There are so many benefits of exercise. They say that there's no part of the body that doesn't benefit from physical activity. Young people who exercise have lower levels of depression, stress, and psychological distress, and higher positive self-images. The strategy listed in the bottom will be in the chat box later. It is from the Trails to Wellness. It is to battle the cycle of inactivity, which does happen for many of us. There'll be a video that you could look at if you'd like. It's basically systematically increasing our levels of activity, setting goals, monitoring those goals to positively impact our mood and our energy levels. The recommended amount of time for exercise is listed on the screen. The fifth tip has to do with providing a safe and social interactions. During COVID-19 restrictions, it's very hard for many of us. Many humans tend to be social individuals. Isolation can be challenging. Many of us were craving social interactions. So it's important to try to make time for fun as well as quiet times, but engagement with others. And we have to acknowledge some of our gathering places are gone or maybe unable to be used right now due to the flood. We miss hugs, handshakes, high fives, and smiles. Behind masks, we can't see the smiles sometimes. 80% of our communication is nonverbal, so we are intentionally trying to tell children that we are smiling when we are at school. You can sometimes see it in the corners of your eyes too. Using healthy distancing measures to connect with one another through technology or outside games can really help our mental health. It was interesting to see how all of a sudden distant bonfires and drive-by parades and picnics became the new fad. We also have to think of new ways to celebrate sometimes, such as the car show this past weekend in Sanford. Again, providing safe social interactions helps boost our mental health, as well as getting outside in nature. To get outside is so important for us. I actually did that just prior to this presentation. Spending time in nature is an effective way to release stress and improve our overall well-being. Researchers are finding that people who live in areas of green space or outside have less depression, anxiety, and stress. Researchers from U of M indicated that we can lower our stress hormone levels by taking at least 20 minutes in a place that provides a sense of nature, such as maybe heading outside on our deck for the morning coffee, or nurturing a plant, which looks like a sense of nature even within our home. Taking a lunch break on that park bench or going for a walk and watching the clouds. This morning, while I was practicing my own well health, I should say, I was watching a video and exercising. I have permission to share this video. It has to do with an 18-year-old from our county who's biking across the United States right now. He's going from Midland to LA, and much of what he shared in his interview has to do with these 11 strategies that I'm sharing today. He was talking about struggles with mental health. He talked about getting outside in nature, having hope, and exercising. He started his bike trip and his biking when a teacher who formed a relationship with him gave him a bike. It's an amazing story. If you haven't heard about it, look it up. I would encourage you to do so. Limiting screens is also on this Let's be honest, many of us spend a lot of times on our phone or screens each day. I've looked at some of the averages when doing the research for this. It's quite amazing. If we were to put in the chat box what we think the average is for us, I bet it'd be markedly different than what I'm finding in some of this research. And then when I think really about it, I do spend a lot of time on the screen myself. The averages show that adults spend about 10 to 11 hours a day on screens. It's not that screens are all bad. They're amazing things. We can find lots of information, connect with one another. We can Zoom now, and we can do FaceTime. But the question is, how much is too much? I'm sure we have all been in the room where we look around and realize everybody's on a screen and nobody is interacting. And we've probably all also, after a couple hours, realized I could have gone outside for a walk while I was on my screen, looking at some information that maybe I didn't need to be at that point in time. So there are sometimes better ways that we can spend our time that are more engaging. Another thing to consider is really that we need to monitor what the children are seeing on their screens and what we have on the background playing in our homes. So screens can decrease social interactions. They can also increase interactions when we're on COVID-19 shutdown. Basically, try to monitor your screen time, interact with one another, and get outside when you can. They're finding in research that volunteering has great impact on mental health. It can decrease the risk of depression. It can increase our sense of purpose and our routine that we're seeking, teaches us valuable skills. It helps us keep physically and mentally active, reduces our stress levels. And if you're volunteering with the intent of helping others, research is showing it can actually prolong your life. It allows you to meet others and develop new relationships. So many of the things that we've just talked about in the earlier strategies or tips are actually enhanced by volunteering. I know during the flood recovery stage and even now, we need to monitor the type of volunteering that we're doing for ourselves to make sure that it is helpful and that we're not putting ourselves in a situation that is impacting our own mental health, making sure that we are not being traumatized by situations. So I mentioned that in particular as I monitored my own children's volunteer efforts. And sometimes we needed to change them and make sure that they were doing something that was helpful for them as well as others. The 9th tip here is really to be kind. Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. These are truly unprecedented times. We have never experienced a 500-year flood during a global pandemic before. Have grace. Everyone has a story. Your story matters. There's no, as I said, one-size-fits-all strategy for dealing with stress. There's also no one-size-fits-all strategy for grieving. Everybody walks through this a slightly different way. So let's be there for one another. And sometimes simply offering a smile can not only help the other person, but it boosts our mood too. The last 2 strategies I'm going to share today are writing things out and then some calming strategies. So with writing things out, they realized that putting down our thoughts on paper can help improve our mental health as well. It can reduce our mental distress. Often, our minds are very busy places. We have so many things to remember. We may have some difficult thoughts that we have struggles getting out of our heads. So writing them down can help us relax at times and reassure our brain that we don't have to remember everything. We can write our feelings down as part of a bedtime routine so they don't disrupt our sleep. Keep a small journal, write down some ideas, track our moods. Some teens I know are into bullet point journals right now, which is something that could be looked up. We can write down our worries and fears and tear them up. Martina's going to cover a gratitude journal that's been shown to boost mental health. And you can also use art. We can draw it out, paint it out, use many different ways to express ourselves. The final strategy that I'm covering today is about learning some sort of calming strategy. Often these are guided or learned through another individual. So such as yoga, you may have a yoga instructor or a mental health provider that helps you learn some of these calming strategies. But there are also many videos out there, apps that we're going to share with you in the chat box or links, where you may be able to use some of these breathing strategies on your own if you're interested in looking up some of them. So yoga instructors, there are trauma-informed yoga instructors, mindfulness, the idea of paying attention to the present moment. Breathing exercises, Martina's going to cover in just a bit, and body scans are all things, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all, every strategy for every person. You find what works for you to keep you calm and relaxed in stressful situations. And sometimes that might be a walk in the woods versus sitting with your thoughts and feelings at that moment. I'm going to turn it over to Martina to cover a few strategies for us.
Thank you, Megan. This slide goes over some evidence-based strategies for anxiety, worry, trauma that have been proven to be really effective. Oftentimes when we are experiencing a trauma, living through a trauma or really stressful times, our breathing changes. So as Megan mentioned, there are trauma-informed yoga teachers, and I'm a yoga teacher as well. And one thing that we concentrate on in yoga is the way in which we breathe, which I think gets lost in the shuffle a lot of times. And when we're stressed, we often don't breathe with our full capacity. We have chest breathing, which continues to reactivate the trauma and the stressor, because that's sending a message to our body that we are anxious, that we cannot calm down, that we're not in a safe place. So with some of these strategies that you see listed, and just in a few moments, I'll lead you through a square breathing exercise. It allows you to breathe fully and deeply, which then in turn sends a message to your body that you are in a safe and calm space and can rest and digest some of the thoughts and feelings that you're experiencing. And I know immediately following the disaster, when we were passing out food, a lot of people that I ran into initially denied that they were hungry or said, no, thank you, give it to the next person, I need to keep working. And several people that I came in contact with, I actually asked if they would just breathe with me, take a couple deep breaths, and we spent some time doing that. And at the end of that, they started to notice their hunger cues. They started to talk to me about, oh, I haven't eaten in a while, or maybe I should sit down. So it was really this beautiful moment where when we can tap into our body's most basic needs, it also starts the kind of expansive healing process. So keeping that in mind, I was going to lead you guys through a square breathing exercise. Square breathing is a powerful yet simple relaxation technique that again helps us return to our normal breathing patterns, the ways in which our body was meant to breathe. Deep breathing techniques have been shown to significantly reduce the production of hormones associated with stress, like cortisol. And actually there's studies that show the more often that we intentionally deep breathe and go through these exercises, it sets us up so for in future stressors, we're able to tap into the skill, and it just does not have the same impact, negative impact on our body. This style of breathing, I kind of already alluded to this, but it also helps us get out of that fight, flight, freeze response that is so typical when we go through a stress or a trauma, and back into that rest, digest mode of functioning in our daily life. So without further ado, this square breathing exercise is just a moment or two. Often when you look up these online, there's many videos. There's one embedded into our presentation. They can be between 5 or 8 minutes long often, but today, just for the sake of kind of dipping our toe into this, this strategy, it'll just be a few moments. So the first thing I'm going to say, that if you try this out, it's ideal that you would like to find a quiet place that doesn't have many distractions. That's becoming more and more difficult with at-home schooling and things like that. But if you can, get into a quiet place in your home or outside. And I'm just going to ask you to sit in what we call a dignified position. So that's with your backbone straight, you're fully planted in your seat, feet are flat on the ground. And we'll just kind of start to notice ourselves in the room. That might seem odd, but again, oftentimes with our thoughts, we are taken away to all different places, past and future places. So just noticing where we are right now in real time. If you feel comfortable, I'll ask you to close your eyes. You don't have to, but it's helpful to decrease some distractions. And again, just noticing the chair beneath you, and start to sense the earth below you, beneath your feet, the sky above you. And we'll place one hand on our chest and one hand on our belly. This is just going to help us notice our breathing practices. And again, closing our eyes if we feel comfortable. And as our eyes are closed, we will just envision a square in front of us, just the shape of a square. And on our first inhale, we'll imagine guiding up the square. Then we will hold our breath. On the exhale, going down the other side of the square and holding our breath again. So it's like we're making a shape with our breath. We'll hold all of these breaths for 4 seconds. So let's take an inhale, filling our belly. 3, 2, 1. Hold our breath. 3, 2, 1. Exhaling fully. 2, 1. Hold our breath. 2, 1. Take a deep inhale, pressing into that hand on your belly. Holding our breath. Exhaling completely, letting go of all that does not serve you in this present moment. Holding our breath. Inhaling deeply, filling up with strength, resiliency. Hold. Exhaling completely. Hold. And before we blink our eyes open, if they're closed, I just invite you to take one more deep breath, filling all the way up with air, maybe the deepest breath you've had all day, all week. Expanding our belly, expanding our chest, and then on the exhale, letting go through your mouth. We'll drop our chin to our chest and then blink your eyes open if they were closed. So that's just an example of square breathing. Like I said, it's helpful maybe to do it a little bit longer, but I just wanted to introduce it to you guys to see if it's something that you might be interested in using. The other thing that I love about square breathing is you can take it anywhere with you. It costs no money. You don't have to have access to any type of resources. This is a skill that you can carry with you at all times. And like I said, there's lots of different breathing exercises that are available if you look on YouTube or look up some mindfulness teachers. The other thing that I wanted to touch base on, again, there's so many wonderful strategies on the slide, but for the sake of time, are gratitude journals. This is something that I do. This is something that I use in my practice with clients often, both in yoga studio and in therapeutic setting. And there's reason for that. So gratitude journals is another thing that I love because you don't have to necessarily run out and purchase anything. You can literally use paper at your disposal, any type of writing utensil. And research shows that people that do use gratitude journals, that there's a significant increase in their sense of meaning in life. They report more satisfaction. They report more hope when they go through adverse situations. And there's a significant drop often in depressive symptoms or negative emotions. When you do a gratitude journal, sometimes our initial response is to try to like list everything in our life that we're thankful for, right? That's not bad necessarily. That's, you know, a wonderful thing to do as well. But research shows that if you actually pinpoint a few things each day and then you develop those reasons. So rather than saying, I'm grateful for my coworkers, it would be something along the lines of, I'm so grateful for my coworkers because they remembered my birthday, they brought me a yummy treat to work, and they gave me a great card, and I felt really special and cared for. So as you're kind of naming what you're thankful or grateful for, you really want to immerse yourself in those feelings and in that situation rather than just running through it. So that's something that you can start your day off with. It is hard sometimes, given the situations that we're going through, to name off things that we're grateful for. Sometimes the world, it can just seem so overwhelming, and that's all the more reason to do it, right? Because it's helping us get out of that maybe reactive pattern, that habitual pattern of noticing maybe things that we're struggling with or negative aspects of our life, and we're trying to transition into noticing the aspects of which we're grateful. And then I was going to go into the body scan, but I think for the sake of time, I'm just going to briefly mention that. A body scan is a form of a meditation. It's often the first that's taught in mindfulness programs. And it's a type of meditation where you you can either start at the top of your head or the tips of your toes, and then you progressively go through areas of your body, just noticing how they're feeling, or noticing them against your bed or against your chair. And again, really resting in the present moment. I've seen body scans that are as short as a minute, and I've seen them 90 minutes plus. So again, there's so many wonderful resources out there. And body scans can really be a great way of kind of getting used to meditation or introduction to meditations. We can go to the next slide. So just real quickly, these are some wonderful resources that were put, the digital resources for elementary and secondary students were developed by Megan, and there's just so much goodness in those, and there's an embedded link in our presentation if you want to look at those at a later time. And then some free apps that we listed here. I've used all of them. I really enjoy the Insight Timer app. It's very easy to download, and you can search for meditations and topics. You can literally just type in I feel anxious or anxiety, and then there will be 500 meditations at your disposal, all different lengths of time, different experience necessary that would help you approach those feelings of anxiety. So they're all wonderful from my perspective, and they really provide a lot of different resources that you can use to manage some of these difficult feelings.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to Dina.
I'm just going to take a few moments to share some local resources and a free resource sponsored by Community Mental Health for Central Michigan. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So Community Mental Health for Central Michigan is sponsoring a tool called My Strength, and it's an online or mobile app that anyone in our community, in the Midland County community, can access. Many things impact our mood, whether it's job changes or moving, bills. Sometimes it feels like our moods are just controlling us, whether it's losing sleep at night or having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. And the My Strength app is really cool. It's like a virtual gym for the mind. It provides personalized emotional health resources for your mind, body, and spirit. So the tools within the My Strength app can be used to empower you to manage stressful situations and strengthen your well-being. Each time you use the app, you'll find new and unique personalized tools to manage things like anxiety or depressive thoughts or feelings. And it's tailored based on information that you input into the system to help you set goals and track your progress over time with your own well-being. It's completely confidential and free and secure, safe and secure and free to use. And on the next slide, it has the information for signing up. So you can either go online to mystrength.com and sign up online, or you can download the mobile app with the access code listed there is what makes it free. CMHCM Cares. So if you can move to the next slide, Megan. Sometimes life does give us more than we can handle on our own, and I just want to reiterate that it's okay to ask for help. Reaching out and finding a trained professional to help you learn some of the coping skills and strategies that Megan and Martina have shared with you today does not make you weak or crazy. Even myself as a licensed counselor, sometimes events in my life are just more powerful than what my current coping strategies can handle. And there's times in my life where I've had to reach out to friends and say, I really need to talk to someone. Do you know of a counselor? Can you point me in the right direction? And, you know, having a trained professional to hear me out and point me in the right direction really has helped. So you can ask a friend for a referral. You can contact your insurance company for a list of mental health providers in the area that accept your insurance. You can reach out. There are a number of low-cost, no-cost treatment options available in Midland County. You can find those resources by contacting or calling 211 or visiting my Hope Portal, myhopeportal.com. And I also want to point out that if you or someone you love is experiencing a mental health crisis, Community Mental Health for Central Michigan does offer a 24/7 crisis line for anyone in our community. The number is listed on the screen. Or you can go to our website, cmhcm.org, to get that contact information for our crisis line. So don't wait. If your stress reactions are not improving or worsening, please be sure to reach out for help. Sharon, do we have any questions in the chat box? Or if not, now would be a good time if you guys, we have all of the resources that we discussed in our presentation today are copied and pasted into the chat box. So you have the links to the different resources that were mentioned in Martina and Megan's part of the presentation and the information for mystrength.com. So does anybody have any questions?
If no one does, let me pose a couple while folks may be thinking of others. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Dina, Martina, Megan. What an incredible presentation. These are fantastic resources, and we look forward to putting this online so that you can have access to this as well afterwards. But one of the things that I think, Martina, you mentioned early on is that some of these are normal reactions to an abnormal event, you know, to trauma. So thinking about that, when should individuals expect to see improvement? And at what point, and I know you mentioned this just a little bit, Dina, but at what point should they think about accessing additional resources or help?
Did you want to answer that, Martina?
Yeah, I can put my 2 cents in, and then if you guys, if Megan or Dina, you have other responses, please jump in. But to answer the second part of your question about when should individuals reach out for help, I think it really comes down to if some of these responses or some of these changes in emotions are getting in the way of your daily functioning. Right? So it is completely normal and expected to be tearful, to have many different emotional responses going through your body right now. These are tough things that we're dealing with. Again, I think it really tips the point if it's starting to impact how you parent, or it's starting to impact your child's ability to go to school, starting to impact, social functioning with people that you care about. If you feel like your emotions are hard to manage, right? So again, all of this is normal for an abnormal event, but I think the tipping point or the threshold happens when it starts to feel unmanageable, right? The waves of the emotions or the waves of the responses that you're having, if it feels like I don't know what to do with this, or I don't know how to manage this, then I would really suggest reaching out to a licensed professional to help you kind of sort through some of those emotional and physical responses that you're having. In regards to the first part of the question, and I'm excited to hear if Megan and Dina have other things to share with this, but I think that it really, I mean, grief and trauma response, Megan so eloquently pointed this out, that there's no really hard and fast, you know, quote unquote right response, right? I mean, there's stages of grief that we can progress through. I don't know if I have a technical time, a specific time that people can rely on that they'll start to feel better. I think it comes down to, you know, healing practices and how you're managing the present moment. But, you know, when you look at diagnostic criteria, if you want to go that way with it, we often look at the amount of time that someone has been experiencing these events. And so once it goes past maybe 3 months, that's when things start to become a bit more concerning. But I don't know if Megan or Dina have other responses to that.
I would just add, in addition to what Martina stated, I think we all kind of have a general sense of like either things are starting to improve or they're not. And when significant time has passed and your stress responses are continuing or worsening, especially with the worsening part, like if losing sleep is becoming chronic and it's impacting your mood and you're having, you know, bouts of tearfulness and this continues to go on, it's better to seek help sooner rather than later. You don't have to wait for a magical period of time to pass. If things are worsening, that's a really good sign that it's time to reach out for help. I would also say that in part of the presentation, we talked about some physical reactions to stress. I think it's really important that you do seek medical attention and talk to your primary care physician or family physician if you're having physical reactions to stress, because shortness in breathing, you know, chest pain, we can easily write those off as anxiety responses, but there may be something physically going on. So I think that's important to note. And then also, if at any time you're feeling like hurting yourself or someone else, it's really important that you reach out immediately and not wait. And I would say the same thing if you have a loved one who is experiencing that it's really important that you help them get the help that they need. Did you have another question too, Sharon, or?
Well, let me just read. This comes from Dave Pasick in the text box. It says, I think it's hard for people in the flood to always be facing the issue, i.e. the empty lake out the window at Sanford, the basement or house that still needs to be rebuilt, and it takes so long. Important to get breathers and breaks away from your situation. And he, again, found the tips very helpful and stressed the importance of just getting out and away from it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I thank you, Dave, for bringing that up. And I think, you know, personally, I live the lake, I can see it from where the lake was, I can see it from my window. And I think that, you know, what you're describing is kind of re-triggering of a very traumatic event. And it's really hard. It's really hard when the re-triggering comes maybe from your own home or right outside your window. And so I think that I couldn't agree with you more. I think if you have the accessibility or the resources to take breaks from, you know, from the community to just get away for a little while, go for a drive, go for a walk, even going for a walk at a place maybe like some parks or different areas in Midland that are not readily, it doesn't show that we just went through a massive disaster, right? That can be really helpful for your mental health. So I think that's a very great point, Dave. Definitely breaks are needed to kind of give yourself some breathing room and elicit a healing response.
Just quick, is it possible for next presentation to show some pictures about the dams and the lakes? Of course, I knew the lakes are empty now, but since I showed up the first time in 1996, like Sanford Lake, I never saw it empty. So, and it would be interesting from Switzerland to see some pictures of the situation which is now. Just an idea for next meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and sorry to interrupt, Sharon. I was just going to share. I can follow up with you personally and share some resources that are out there that have some photos and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you. And then I did want to just read another comment from Tracy Brown. I also think it's hard when people keep calling this a flood. This is a man-made disaster. When people call it a flood, it re-triggers. It seems to dismiss what has actually occurred. And, you know, an excellent point, you know, it's a dam failure that resulted in flooding. And so, yeah, good point. And this is different. And I know we've had this discussion at the long-term recovery group level, that this is different than disasters that happen where it's a hurricane. I mean, there's a very different component to this, which I think does make it difficult. And I know we're at the end of our time here. So I want to again say thank you to Dina, Martina, and Megan for this excellent presentation. Again, this will be listed. There'll be a link on the Midland Area Community Foundation website. And I don't know if we're going to be putting on the Relief Midland website or not as well, but I think that would be if we can list it there, this would be a great resource. And again, thank you for joining us today, and especially thank you to our presenters. These flood recovery update and communications or connections calls are meant to be a way to provide important information and also updates on what is going on. I know we had a suggestion from Stefan. If there are other things that you would like to see, you're welcome to reach out to us, and very, very happy to try to incorporate that into a presentation. I know this mental health topic came up and several people talked about it. So I know we brought this together pretty quickly. So thank you again to our presenters for pulling it together with some just incredible information. Again, thank you for joining us today. Our next call will be on October 1st. We ask you to register in advance of the call, and we look forward to seeing you again. And again, thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Have a nice afternoon. Bye.